You're already paying $20 a month for ChatGPT Plus. But the moment you try to use GPT-4 through the API for a side project, an automation, anything, you get hit with a completely separate bill. OpenAI charges you twice. And a developer just found a way around it. This is openai-oauth, an open-source project by Evan Zhou. It creates a local proxy server on your machine that authenticates using your existing ChatGPT account via OAuth, the same login flow your browser uses, and then exposes that as a standard OpenAI-compatible API endpoint. Any tool that talks to OpenAI's API can point to this proxy instead. Same interface. Zero API charges. Here's what the demo actually looks like. You clone the repo, run a setup command, authenticate once through your browser, and you get a local server running on localhost. You point your API client at that address, pass any placeholder API key, and fire a request. The proxy intercepts it, swaps in your OAuth credentials, forwards to OpenAI's backend, and streams the response back. From your app's perspective, nothing changed. From your wallet's perspective, everything changed. The project supports streaming responses, which matters if you're building anything chat-like. It maps correctly to the chat completion's endpoint format. And because it uses the same OAuth tokens your browser session uses, it gets access to whatever model tier your subscription includes, GPT-4o, GPT-4, the works. But here's the thing, this is where we have to be honest. What this does not do is give you unlimited, consequence-free API access. OpenAI's terms of service explicitly prohibit using the consumer product to simulate API access. This proxy is essentially impersonating a browser session at the API level. That means your account could be flagged or suspended if OpenAI detects unusual programmatic traffic patterns. This isn't theoretical, it's happened to users of similar workarounds before. It also does not work reliably at scale. OAuth tokens expire. The refresh mechanism works for personal use, but if you're running high-volume requests, you will hit edge cases rate limits tied to your consumer account, not the more permissive API tier, and session invalidation that requires re-authentication. So for anything production-facing, this is not a drop-in replacement. What surprised me was how clean the implementation is. Evan built this in a way that's genuinely readable, the token refresh logic, the request forwarding, the streaming handler, it's all clean enough that developers could fork it and adapt it. Which leads to where this gets interesting. The realistic future for a tool like this is narrow but valuable. Internal tooling on a single developer's machine, prototyping, testing prompts, running evals before you commit to an API spend. Teams that want to let one paid ChatGPT account serve as a development tier endpoint for local experimentation. It could also evolve into something more robust if the community adds proper token rotation, rate limiting, and error handling, essentially a self-hosted development API gateway. If you're building an app that eventually goes live, you'd swap this out for real API keys at deployment. But during development? The cost math is hard to ignore. API calls during prototyping can easily run you $20 or $30 before you ship anything. If your ChatGPT subscription already covers that tier, this proxy means you prototype for free. So why does this exist? Because OpenAI made a structural decision to separate consumer and developer pricing entirely. There's no bridge between them. You can't apply your Plus subscription as credit toward API usage. You can't get a reduced API rate as a Plus subscriber. It's two separate products with two separate bills, even though the underlying model is the same. That gap creates friction for indie developers, students, hobbyists, anyone who wants to build something small and doesn't want to open a second billing relationship just to run a few thousand tokens. Evan's project is a direct response to that friction. It says, the model is the same, the account is the same, the only thing different is the interface, so let's bridge that. Is it production ready? No. Is it compliant with OpenAI's terms? Also no. But as a development tool, as a proof of concept, and as a very clear signal to OpenAI about what developers actually want, it's hard to argue with the logic. If you're the kind of developer who'd rather understand the OAuth flow than just use the proxy blindly, the GitHub repo is worth reading through. Link is in the description. And in the next episode, we're looking at a project that builds a full local RAG pipeline, retrieval augmented generation, without any cloud dependencies at all. That one runs entirely on your own hardware. Subscribe so you don't miss it.